got us pinned down with mortar fire. Yours?
We're taking that trench.
Smith, Pigeon, we're taking the trench.
Gute Schuss.
Nine an Rex!
Was? Scheiße!
Scheiße! Ist geht! Schneller! Schneller! Schneller!
Excellent, all A zone. Right here, we have not an M1911A1, but we have an actual original M1911. These pistols served in World War I, World War II, and afterwards, but when people say M1911, they usually refer to the A1 model. This is the original. John Moses Browning's original design. There are a lot of interesting changes that were made to the A1 from this model, and I'm very excited to talk about this pistol, which is literally 106 years old with 106-year-old springs and still fires no problem. So I hope you'll join me today as we talk about the original M1911. But of course, before we get into it, we have to talk about the biggest sponsor of the channel, who is who, Micah?
Primary Arms, providing you with any World War I 1911 pistol dots you could ever need.
That's a Cody Curry thing right there. He puts pistol dots on everything.
Well, it is October, so Primary Arms is giving out free trick-or-treat Halloween with every order.
Yeah, wow, that's super nice of them. And of course, we have Night Vision Network. If you're looking to buy night vision, or you're looking to rent night vision, they have everything you could possibly want, whatever you might be getting up to. What could people be getting up to with night vision, Micah?
You know, you dumpster diving with the raccoons between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Yeah, a big thank you to Night Vision Network.
Rumor has it they have thermals too.
And of course, guys, if you want to get better at shooting, we recommend Mantis for dry fire because it turns your weapon into just an awesome dry fire machine. My employees have stolen it. I use it all the time.
People in World War I used it.
If they had it, they probably would have loved it. I snorted because I thought that was really funny. Go check them out. Guys, obviously all the ammunition today is provided by AAC, so we have to give them a big thank you. You know, we are firing a 106-year-old design, so we're not going to run as many drills with it because it's old, it's priceless, and we don't want to burn it out too bad, but I do think it's important to show you the capabilities and more specifically to race Micah because we're extremely competitive. I owe him like so many games at this point, but you know, what should be on the table for today? Pronouns and bio? So we're gonna run a couple drills at this point. We have our M1911 original springs. We're gonna be a little ginger on it. And right here we have a more modern 1911 Alpha 1. This one is a Musoc. This is built by Musoc Armors, which means it is top of the line. We're gonna compare these two. We're gonna see how they compare in recoil. Micah wanted me to note as well, which I agree with, that the springs are likely worn. They're probably overcompressed at this point. They're probably not as functional as they should be. Despite that, I think it does speak to the longevity and how well the pistol was made, to the fact that it still today is functioning. And if you want to take a close look at that, Micah, like, it is a beautiful weapon. Model 1911 U.S. Army. Being the opposite side, United States property. It's cool. You have the Colt Rampart in the middle.
I don't know if it really gets cooler than that.
No, and it is very worn. We'll talk more about that finish. It's actually a very interesting historical context. We are using modern magazines for this because magazines that are original are expensive. We do have them here. We'll talk about those in a second. Now, when they used to shoot back in the day, it wasn't our modern stance, Weaver stance or whatever you want to call it. It was going to be one-handed, bladed, and the idea being making yourself a smaller target, and it was more gentlemanly. Is that correct, Micah?
Gentlemanly.
Gentlemanly. Okay, so first thing we'll do is one-handed, do it from this line right here, and we'll see who's better. And of course, pistol lanyard, you don't want to lose your weapon. All right, Micah, hit me.
All right, shooter ready. Stand by. Beep.
Dude, it's so weird shooting one-handed. I got through one C-zone. Not bad. Okay, I'll disconnect it from my lanyard for you. All right, buddy, here you are.
This is like all of my childhood video game fantasies.
That was your go command. The Huns.
The Huns. What's that mean?
The Germans.
Okay.
The Huns. Nice, dude. Drilled it out.
It feels good.
Yeah. Oh, you did the same thing as me.
I'm not gonna lie. It felt a lot better than I expected, especially out of a 45. That's not bad.
Dude, 1911 does have a good recoil in.
Wow.
Now we have the M1911 Alpha 1. Let me go ahead and see how that guy runs. And the same, just do recoil comparison.
Shooter ready.
Yeah.
Stand by.
Nicer trigger. A-zone. Looks good. Yeah. Recoil's a little bit less. We do have a light on there as well. It just felt better. It's probably due to the Pachmayr grips as well. I love the Musoc. All right, buddy, you're up. All right, buddy.
Oh, it feels so much better.
I know. Shooter, are you ready? Stand by. You see what I mean?
Both of us stacked all of them in the A zone, and a lot faster too.
It's a better trigger.
It definitely shoots better, like significantly.
This was built by Valor Precision, who was an actual Musoc armor. This is as close as you can get, all the correct parts, and these guns are just finely tuned machines. But, do I think this gun would run 106 years later? I think so, but it really has to be said that this was made in 1908, and it still runs. Like, there is something to be said about that, Shooting the bill drill right here. That's going to be 6 rounds in the torso. Shoot it two-handed modern stance. We'll do compress, and we'll push out and fire.
Okay.
Man, these sights are terrible. Okay.
Shooter ready.
Yeah.
Stand by.
Got too high on there. Otherwise, pretty good. I'll take it, man. Nice. Good shooting, dude. Woo! Nice. Always on. All right. Bill drill with Musoc. Compress. Safety on.
Up.
Nice. Good. That felt really good. Clean. I'll take it, dude. All right. You ready, Micah?
I am.
Shooter, are you ready?
Yep.
Stand by. Up.
Oh,
Nice.
I'll see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh!
Oh, it's okay, buddy. Okay, we're now at 100. You shoot on steel. I guess the question is going to be, does it still got it? Pretty sure it does.
100 yards for a 100-year-old pistol.
106-year-old pistol.
Wait. We should do 1 yard for however old it is.
Oh, 106.
Let's range find it.
Okay.
Here.
106 years old. 1 yard for every year it is old. 106-yard shot. We'll see if we can do it. I think this is going to be more a reflection of me as a shooter than it is on this gun. Shoot us off left. Took me 3 shots. Should be talked about that we have had 0 malfunctions on this, and truly, every shot that we've taken, you've seen, gun hasn't malfunctioned once. I mean,
Do you know how many boomers you just made so hard right there?
Just because it's made of hard steel, you don't make them hard like they used to, boy. Life ain't hard no more.
So we've done a lot of shooting, especially on this particular weapon. Now we're going to do a lot of talking, a lot of the history of these guns, how it came about, because I believe it's a very interesting story about the first semi-automatic recoil-driven weapon that was in use by the United States Armed Forces. Obviously, there's a lot to that, but as far as widely adopted, this is it right here. The M1911 was designed by John Moses Browning. Obviously, a lot of you know that history behind it. But what I find very interesting is kind of the mystique that goes around the history of how this weapon was adopted and the tests that it went through. So when we're talking about the M1911, we do have typically a 7-round magazine. So you can have 1 in the chamber, 7 in the magazine for a total of 8. Compared to revolvers of that time, this was a huge step forward. In addition to that, the caliber used, .45, was also considered a very powerful cartridge compared to a lot of the underpowered revolver cartridges that were being used. Indeed, some of the revolver cartridges that had been used up to that point had been considered weak and ineffective against a lot of human targets. The .45, on the other hand, as you know, still has that mythical performance of being able to, knock a person back. That's not quite the case, but .45 is certainly an effective round. So as far as the adoption of the M1911, my favorite story about it is that when it first went through trials, they took a single pistol, they fired 6,000 rounds on it, and as the weapon became too hot, they dipped it in a bucket of water to cool it back down, and they continued to fire rounds. And according to the sources, the gun went all 6,000 rounds without a single malfunction. And that was considered a good test for military trials, and hence this was adopted and went into production. But you have to understand that the United States military at the time did not have a lot of funding. Not a whole lot of these pistols were made until the U.S. entered World War I. So by the time we entered World War I, World War I was kind of going pretty hard. So Colt had to quickly ramp up production of the M1911, and so a lot of corners were cut, and this led to some very interesting developments, kind of interesting looks to the M1911s that were made around that time period. So before serial number 312,000, the pistols were typically that very iconic, lustrous blue look that the M1911 had. It's a very beautiful, very mirror-like finish. There was a lot of polishing, but it took a lot of time. The U.S. military, as World War I was ramping up and as they were entering into it in 1917, and especially by 1918, requested that Colt remove some of the polishing processes before the bluing processes. So what ended up happening is that due to this, also at the same time they moved to a gas-powered furnace as far as a part of their bluing process. What happened is it changed the color of the bluing. So the bluing went from a very, as you can imagine, a blue color, and it went to a very black color. That led to these being called the Colt Black Army M1911. So as you can see on this one right here, it's a little bit hard to tell because again, the gun is 106 years old. But let's talk about it for a moment. You can still see a lot of the finish on the frame. The slide is fairly worn. And if you notice, if you go to different parts, they're all kind of worn at different rates. This has led a lot of people to believe that these guns were Mixmasters, that they were built after the time. This is actually not the case. A lot of the smaller parts on the Colt M1911 were outsourced or were made previously ahead of time, and they were using the old bluing process. While as the frame and the slide, as of 312,000 for that serial number, and again, mine's at 400,072, means that it was well into that removal of the polishing process prior to bluing. So because of this, you have different types of bluing on the weapon, which means that the weapon will wear quite unevenly. That's why some parts look very lustrous blue, some parts look that really dark kind of Colt Black Army, and then others are just completely worn. The Black Army finish was not nearly as tough as the very highly polished blue finish that they went with before. And again, a lot of you will know the M1911 is having that Parkerized look. That was not introduced until 1943. What's very interesting is you had approximately 300,000 plus M1911s made in the year of 1918. However, the war ended in 1918, so there's actually not a whole lot of these that actually served during World War I. In fact, most of these were put into storage and then were later reissued during World War II. So you saw a lot of M1911s issued during that time because of the fact that there was just so many made. Obviously, production of the M1911A1, wherein changes were made, was ramped up during World War II, and primarily you saw a lot of those M1911A1s. And we'll talk about those differences in a moment here. So the M1911 right here, at the very front right here, we have a very thin front sight post. And the idea is you wanted minimal snag on that. You didn't want this snagging on anything. And the idea also was that this thin sight post makes for very easy for precise aim. And if we go down to the back here, my rear sight is pretty worn. However, it is a U-notch. This was later changed on the M1911A1. So we have a good sight radius, and we had what were considered pretty good sights for the time, but certainly improvements needed to be made. And compared to modern pistol optics, these are pretty abysmal. It's fairly hard to use these. Moving back on our barrels, there are a lot of different barrel designs. Typically they're stamped on a lot of the barrels from M1911s that are this old. You really can't see the stampings that much, and that is certainly the case with mine. If we look at some of the markings on the slide, this is where it kind of gets interesting. But for most of the World War I production M1911s, this isn't always the case. There are a lot of variations out there, and there's a lot of stuff that occurred. But typically you have the Colt rampart that's here in the middle. And there were some variations in the patent information, but generally by the time you're seeing pistols made in 1918, the Colt rampart had been moved to the middle, and this is what was typically seen. You had United States property marked on the frame right there, and then if we go to the other side, we had model of 1911 U.S. Army. It's a very vibey gun. You of course have the serial number right down there, which is how you can identify the approximate year that was made. It's a little bit dicey as far as finding the exact year of production, but based on what we know, this puts this thing about early to mid 1918, which would put it right during those Colt Black Army days. If we go back to the hammer, there were a lot of problems that occurred with this. So first off, it's very easy to thumb this hammer. For being a weapon that was potentially going to be used by cavalry, it's very easy, if you're carrying this with the hammer down, to cock that back and bring that up. It sounds so cool, doesn't it, Micah?
Yeah.
I mean, just listen to that. That sounds awesome. But there are some problems. You had a very short tang right here to protect your hand. So especially on me when I'm getting that nice high grip, and they did train their soldiers to get a high grip on these weapons. As that hammer came back, I felt it right there. It had a tendency to pinch the skin right there, and it wasn't the most comfortable. On the M1911A1, they ended up having an extended tang or beaver tail right there to protect the hand against that hammer bite. The Browning High Power also had the same problem of having that hammer bite, so that's fairly common, and a lot of soldiers did complain about that. If we go back to the frame right here, there's a couple interesting things about the trigger. When we think about an M1911, we typically think of like an incredible trigger, and indeed, this does have a really good trigger, but the length of pull on the trigger was actually shortened on the M1911A1. So people with really small hands, and you have to realize people were smaller back then, complained about how far they had to put their finger forward to get into the trigger on this guy. Obviously easy for most people nowadays. So on the M1911A1, they did shorten that trigger a little bit. And then in addition to that, you can see right here that your finger has to wrap around the frame right there to be able to get your finger in there. If we take a look at the M1911A1, you can see it has that scalloped cut right there. This is typical and is very indicative of an M1911A1. Makes it easier for that finger to reach in and to get in there for shooters with a smaller hand. Going back to the grips right here, the checkered grips with the diamonds are very classic for a Colt Black Army 1911 or a World War I 1911. It was moved to an all checkered panel for the M1911A1, and the reason for that was more grip. There was also some things done that were different. These are walnut grips. As you can see, the color is quite dark on these. This is due also to a lot of the oils from people's hands who have been gripping this. I really do want to know about the history of this gun. More than likely, due to the amount that were made in 1918, I doubt it saw service, but you never know, right, Micah?
We'd like to assume it did.
I would like to assume that it did.
It killed many Nazis.
There are no Nazis back then.
Germans, whatever,
There's
man.
Germans. There is a huge... Oh, do we have to go over World War I history? How did World War I start?
Are you just doing this because everyone's already mad at me about the Sean Connery thing?
I'm just asking you a simple question. How did World War I start?
World War I started, it had nothing to do with the Jews. It was Archduke Ferdinand
Assassinated?
by the Germans.
No. Anyhow, he was also killed by a John Moses Browning weapon, which is always a good time. Colt 1903 pocket hammerless. But we digress a little bit. But that being said, it should be noted how nice the triggers are on these. So we're going to ghost this 106-year-old trigger together. So safety, just you hear how positive that click is still.
Nice and tingy.
Oh, it feels great. Okay. chilling into that trigger. So you have a little
Get the
bit.
tip of your trigger on.
Yeah, sorry. You have a little bit of play going in. That's about a 5-pound pull, very crisp. Okay, let's feel it from the reset. Oh, short reset, about 5 to 6 pounds. Very, very nice, very clean. That's a great trigger. When you think about all the revolvers at the time being single action or double action, this was certainly a godsend, comparatively. And that does bring us to another thing. So right here we have a straight mainspring housing. This was changed on the M1911A1. Interestingly, you see a lot of modern pistols that do not have the M1911A1 changed, but we'll put up a picture right here. So the M1911A1 had an arched mainspring housing, so there's a reason for that. What they were finding was that soldiers who were used to revolvers, they had a very specific grip. It's a little bit different on a 1911, so they found that soldiers were either gripping a little too far low on it, or they're tending to overdrive and they're pushing the weapon down. So by adding a non-straight mainspring housing right here, where it was arched, it forced the hand a little bit higher. It's kind of dubious whether or not that actually had a good impact on the shooting of soldiers. Generally, it's thought that it really didn't do a whole lot, but it was included on the M1911A1, and you certainly saw it as what was touted as an upgrade. Obviously right here, we do have our grip safety. So in order to depress the trigger, you can't depress the trigger until that grip safety is engaged, which means you have a good high grip on it, at which point you can depress the trigger. The magazine release is one-sided right here, just on the right side. You were either right-handed or you were Satan. So that brings us to our magazines. We talked about these a little bit, but I'll kind of rehash a little bit as we show some of it. But obviously we had witness marks so you could see how many rounds you were carrying. And in addition to that, you have that very cool two-tone look from the cyanide dip that they used for heat treatment in order to add strength to those magazine lips. You don't see that in modern magazines. You don't see that in magazines that were made for the M1911A1 because heat treatment had actually changed by that point, improved, and that was not a necessary step. But back in the day, that's what they had. I'm sure those workers were fine with hot vats of cyanide.
They're fine.
Yeah, I mean, they're...
I was a mechanic. I sprayed brake clean all up over myself. For
Dude,
like
you've
6
had like
years.
cancer.
It was just colon cancer. I wasn't spraying it in my ass.
We don't think so. So moving back down here, we have a very smooth front grip right here, smooth on the back strap right here. The only grip purchase that you really had was on the checkering, and of course on this one, it is very worn. On the slide itself, compared to modern 1911s that you see, like this Musehawk right here at the front with the forward serrations, you don't see that on these classic 1911s because it was a different method as far as reloading these weapons was concerned. So this brings us to the end, generally talking about the M1911. The other thing I would like to opine upon is how excellent this weapon served in combat. It's widely regarded as an extremely reliable weapon, as an extremely versatile, extremely accurate weapon. I remember my grandfather told me that when he qualified in the M1911, he said he could throw the gun better than he could shoot it. But marksmanship training really wasn't what it is today. These are very accurate weapons. And what's interesting is that what we consider to be the World War I 1911 served for far longer than just World War I. In fact, many of them never saw World War I. And
Two World Wars.
2 World Wars,
be-
buddy.
soon
Soon
to
to
be
be 3
3.
World Wars. There's a lot of mystique behind this weapon, behind the M1911. And it's funny. When you say M1911 or you say 1911, it's generally understood that you're talking about the A1. It's like the AK-47. There really aren't a lot of AK-47s, but there are a lot of AKMs. But everyone just calls it AK-47. That's the same thing with the 1911. Overall, what we have here is probably one of the most iconic weapons that has ever been designed. It served for a very long time, well up into the mid-teens of the 2000s, which is an insane amount of time for a weapon to be serving. Of course, Makarov is still used by the Russians, but they don't have any money. The 1911 is a fantastic weapon. I love talking about it. I love shooting it. They're so comfortable to fire. And being able to get some time on this 106-year-old pistol and be able to shoot it, this isn't a weapon that I'll be shooting often at all. It sits on my wall as a reminder of the history of the United States military and its a lot of its customs and a lot of the traditions behind it. So it was a real pleasure to be able to shoot it today. I know Micah enjoyed it quite a bit as well. And I hope you guys enjoyed the look at the M1911, the original 1911.
The 1911.
The actual 1911. A very cool firearm. And man, despite everything, if you want to understand something about it, the fact that it fired all day with zero malfunctions. So
That's why I open carry 1911.
That's why I carry 1911. Boom.
we got nothing else for you except for dad advice. Dad advice for today is, of course, going to be hydration. Drink water, guys. You're probably dehydrated. Mike, what color is your pee?
It's really clear.
Is it really?
Yeah, extremely actually. I've been drinking I've been trying to do 5 Kirkland water bottles a day.
Yeah, you want like light lemonade color. You don't
Oh,
want
it's too clear then.
Yeah, you don't want to flush everything. You want to be careful.